Does your brand feel a little bit off? Like it's just not quite the right fit? Maybe you're constantly rebranding, constantly chasing something that's going to feel right, yet you always feel unsettled. You always feel this urge to change all the time because for some reason you can never find something that feels like the right fit. You might initially create a style that you're excited about, and within a few weeks or months, you start to get bored of it. It doesn't feel right anymore. Well, it could be that you might be making one of these 3 mistakes. So the first, a very common mistake, is diving straight into visual research. Rather than considering what you actually want your brand to be about, what it should be communicating, so you just jump on Pinterest or Instagram or wherever you like to find inspiration, and it then becomes just a matter of what pops up that day, what shows up immediately, what takes your fancy, what images you happen to stumble across, and you're going to end up basing your branding on those things because you're like, oh, this is really pretty, and oh, I love this, and yeah, I'm going to use that for my brand. And so in a way, it's just a luck of the draw, what happened to show up that day, what happened to be pushed to the top of your search. And so you're not really basing on anything but luck in a way by what's just going to take your fancy that day of what showed up in your search. And that's not a great way to be basing your branding because it's really just like you're just doing a potluck brand of you're just, cranking some wheels to see which one will I get today. Okay, that's the style we're going to go with. And so by doing that, your brand isn't very meaningful or true to your business. You're essentially just picking an aesthetic out of a hat. You're not actually going into it with any purpose. The second common mistake is following trends. Now, sometimes trends can work for your brand. Maybe there's a particular style that's very in right now and it actually happens to work very well for your business. But a lot of people will just jump on trends just because they're popular right now. And they assume because that's popular, people will like that and they will look good and my brand will look modern and trendy. But what they fail to see is this actually ends up making you blend in and also date very quickly. So a lot of people will be following these trends, and so your brand's going to look like all the other brands that are also following along with these design trends. And secondly, it's going to date. Soon that trend will die off, something else will come out, and yours will look very set in that time frame. And so you're not creating a brand that's going to last. And so you end up just chasing new styles all the time, constantly changing your branding. And so it's got no strong identity of its own because it's more just trend hopping all the time. And the third mistake is brand envy. And this is where you stumble across someone's brand and fall in love with maybe the whole brand or some aspect of it, and you want to imitate it. So you want to do something very similar. And I've seen this come up where people say, look, everyone keeps asking me about the font I use. Now, yes, it is a nice font, but please don't just use it because I'm using this font, because you're not using it for the right reason then. Maybe you have a particular reason you want that font. Maybe you're just doing it for something that's not related to your brand, but don't just copy it because that's the font that I'm using. People will feel very hesitant to share that font because thinking, oh, everyone's just trying to copy and imitate my style rather than trying to do something that's unique to them. And they're doing this in the wrong way. It's not like they're trying to gatekeep and say, oh no, I'm not going to tell you what my font is. It's more that they're concerned that people are doing things for the wrong reason. They're just imitating because they're like, oh, that person's successful. They've used that font. It looks so cool. I want to do that too. And they've got brand envy and they're basically just trying to imitate somebody that they admire. And so this is something that people can very easily fall into. They come across a brand they love. They're just like, oh, what they've done is so beautiful. I want something very similar. Now, they may not completely straight out copy it. They might not be, ripping somebody off and trying to imitate their brand completely, but something about their brand, maybe it's their font, maybe it's their colors, maybe it's just that overall feeling they've created. They want to do something very similar because they just love what the other person did. And this can be very problematic because you're not actually creating something unique to you or your own message. So it's all about their brand, not about yours. So you've actually gone about it for the wrong reasons. And also you're not carving out a unique identity. You're starting to look like other people. And if you've been in the business world for a while, you'll notice that you become familiar with different brands. You'll really get to know people and will identify them by their brand identity. So you can actually sometimes spot a fake when people have just imitated a style that they've come across and really love. I can often really pick this. I'll come across a brand like, that feels a lot like this other person. And I'll have a look at what they're doing and be like, it feels like they're trying to imitate this other person. And unfortunately, this can actually pull your branding down. If it feels too similar to another brand that people are familiar with, they come across you, there's going to feel something a bit off there because it will feel like an imitation version. And so it's not a good look. You really need to have your own unique identity. Now, that doesn't mean you can't draw inspiration from different places and bring it into your own unique identity. But you have to be careful that your inspiration isn't just coming from one source to the point that you actually create an identity that looks way too similar. And you might think, well, I didn't copy it exactly. My style is different. It's just got that similar feel and look. But it's not, identical. I didn't use the exact same things they're using. But I have to say, people can still feel that. You can feel that essence, that overall feeling is the same, and it just feels off. So if you've been making any of these mistakes, what should you be doing instead? Well, instead of chasing an aesthetic by, doing the visual research or looking at trends or looking at what other people are doing, you should actually start with your message. You should actually be starting off by thinking about, what do I want my brand to actually communicate? Who am I? What is my brand message? What is my brand story? My values, my why, my mission, all those things. What do I offer? Who is my audience? Who am I trying to attract? How do I want to put a bit of me into it? How do I want to put a bit of what my business is all about into it? And getting really clear on your brand foundations and what your brand message actually is. Because visuals are a form of communication. So before we can communicate with visuals, we need to know what it actually is that we want to communicate. Otherwise, we can actually be sending a mixed message, because if you're just going after an aesthetic, you might be sending a message that doesn't actually align with your brand. And so what happens then is you confuse people, you attract the wrong people, and you'll struggle to create a strong and memorable brand. So if you've been struggling with your branding, you feel like you're constantly rebranding and you never feel like it's right, stop looking at aesthetics and take the time to really think about what your brand should communicate. So I hope you found this helpful, and if you'd like to learn more about branding, graphic design, creativity, and using Canva, make sure you subscribe to this channel, and I'll see you next time.